So I have Ashish Gupta here today, who's going to tell us a little bit about his background and how he got to where he is today. Ashish, why don't you go ahead and give us that breakdown where you came from to get this thing started?
Yep, sure. And firstly, thanks for having me here, Matt. I was really looking forward to this conversation. So, background on myself, I've been in tech most of my career. I was previously the co-founder of a wireless company, and it was one of those starting in a garage type stories where we had no money, but just an interesting idea. Eventually, we actually built out a really nice technology, scaled out the business, and it was eventually acquired by Fortune 500 Qualcomm out of San Diego. After that, I was at Apple in senior management in their iPhone operations team and managed a $2 billion a year budget and pretty fascinating set of team members. Eventually, after 4 or 5 years at Apple, I had the entrepreneurial bug again. I quit Apple. I acquired a distressed e-commerce business and spent the next 4 years turning every aspect of that business around, from the team, the culture, the sales channels, the supply chain, and eventually it did turn around. It was acquired in 2023. After that, I had the chance to help a couple of small, medium-sized businesses where their founders were stuck. The revenue that plateaued, their teams were burnt out. They didn't know how to get to the next level of growth. And I retooled all different aspects of those businesses. Within 3, 4 months, their revenues unlocked and they grew 30, 40%. And I think more interesting for me was that their teams were no longer burnt out. So they were revitalized and refreshed to continue sustaining that growth. Eventually, I had more engagement as a fractional COO than I could handle myself. And that's when I started my current business, which is Scale Up Exec. It's a fractional COO firm that's specifically focused on small, medium-sized businesses to actually roll up. We've got a bunch of team members who roll up their sleeves and execute on strategies and the work needed to get a business unlocked or to turn it around.
And is the CFO, the fractional CFO, is it focused on technology companies or is it any company as you would see fit?
Yeah, firstly, they're COOs, Chief Operating Officers. My team focuses mostly on COOs. And we focus also in mostly mostly traditional businesses, so not tech. Very few
Yeah.
of our engagements are in tech. Actually, more than 50% are in commercial real estate. So that's why I thought that actually is relevant, this podcast that you have here. So we've got a bunch of capital brokers, syndicators, private equity firms that deal with multi-family apartments. We've got construction folks. We've got development people. So like a full gamut of people in commercial real estate and
Yeah.
also property brokers and,
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think from here, I have questions on the technology side of things
Okay.
and driving a technology company and producing technology. I feel like there's something there where, right now everybody's interested in AI to improve their business, which to them is a technology play, but to you, it might be something different. When I say AI deployments, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Firstly, I think what it means to me is maybe a bit different than what I'm seeing people doing. What I'm seeing people doing is that they hear about a cool technology. They're like, let's try it out in our business. And then 95%, actually, there were some stats recently that came out about that 95% of AI deployments end up being scrapped because they're not practical, useful, or making it a positive ROI in the business. So actually, interestingly, in Scale Up Exec, we've built up now a group in-house outside of our COOs that deals specifically with AI deployments. And my team is really skilled in this, but the way we approach it is a bit different. First, we scrap the idea of AI from our minds and instead look at what are the business problems that exist. So what are the issues that exist either in processes or in the way people are communicating or the way projects are managed or tasks are managed, or maybe there's a bunch of manual work that's happening in a place that doesn't need to be done manually. So what are these real business problems? And then second is we often find if you just immediately start deploying AI to solve it, there's often, especially in traditional industries like commercial real estate, or let's say we've got a bunch of medical practices and we observe this there as well. If you all of a sudden implement a bunch of AI stuff, many people feel very hesitant to use it. They might not have the training, or they might feel like it's going to be jeopardize their own job, or it might have some other impacts that they just don't know because it's so new. And so after we understand that step one of business problem, second is we really work with a team to understand how are they currently working through this problem and what are the potential solutions. AI may or may not be a part of that solution, but we work collectively together to come up with a good solution. And we might propose, okay, by the way, here's a bunch of interesting things that might work here, but what does everybody feel? And then how do we like get everybody's buy-in to this whole process, make them part of the solution building process. And then eventually, once everybody's bought in, then we start developing, we ideally do small little tests where people can start seeing the value and how it benefits their own jobs and their own work. And ideally, AI should allow us to spend more time on higher value work and not be spending time on low value stuff.
Yeah.
And so once people start seeing the benefit on their own jobs or their own roles, that, oh, they're now able to shift into more meaningful work that they also enjoy more, then now everybody gets bought in. And then now once eventually you deploy a solution, firstly, you have everybody's weight in it. And then secondly, it actually starts making a difference. So we've done this now again, and we're just seeing when we do it right, when we start with the right process of trying to solve things together as a team and start and actually solve real business problems, not just implement a bunch of stuff just because it looks cool. Then now it actually has resulted every time in positive ROI and a really meaningful impact on the business.
Yeah. How do you know if you're on the right path? You said when we do this right, we have success, essentially. So how do you know you're on the right path when you are deploying this? If you're the company, if you're one of the people coming to you for the solution.
Yeah. One of the first ways you know you're on the right path is all the prep work you do beforehand, before you even start doing any integrations or deployments. So that prep work, you'll have done a bunch of financial analysis to see what potential ROI could this bring. And that could be, let's say, in terms of labor savings, or it could be in terms of you being able to reach more prospects than you can right now doing manual processes. So you can, with a lot of AI tools, you can reasonably quantify an ROI before you even get started. So you know that this is a good use of time and financial resources to actually work on this. And oftentimes we actually look at 4 or 5 different business problems to see which one will have the best ROI, and we should work on those first rather than just take one tool and start implementing it. So actually that's when you know you're on the right track, when all that prep work is done beforehand. And then you keep on checking in through all the different stages of deployment, which means you keep checking in as the team is getting involved, and are they feeling that it's going the right direction? So even not just yourself, but you're even checking in with the team. They're feeling in that things are going the right direction. And then eventually, once you deploy, you try and match up the real results you're getting versus what you had predicted in the beginning to make sure you're on the right track.
Yeah. How do you deal with the owners that are not willing to give up control of the business? So you've said the team quite a few times, the team is giving their feedback about this. What if you have an owner that's in the mix and the team falls behind his decision-making, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. So you're asking that if the owner, founder, CEO is resistant to a new deployment.
Resistant, or maybe he might have this idea of what the AI should look like because he saw something in the mix that out in the wild that another company was using, and he feel this is what we should be doing as well, even though the team is offering their advice that isn't what should be happening at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think firstly, that's why it's really important to have everybody part of the whole journey from initial scoping, where everybody is like debating and working through the initial scoping as well. And so if everybody's part of the whole decision-making process, we might ourselves early on figure out that, okay, this is not going the direction that we think makes sense, but it's okay. If they want to go in a different direction, that's fine. A lot of times what I found is we usually don't tackle a big AI deployment right from the time zero of engaging with a client. We usually tackle some easy wins first, so people can start building trust on what these tools can actually do and what impact it can have, including an owner or a CEO. So it's actually good to have some quick early wins where people can start seeing what benefit there is. And then once they start seeing benefit, then it's easier you've got their trust. And then now you can take them on the next step on bigger deployments or more deeper engagements.
Yeah.
So it is important to go step by step and also the interesting thing is every day there's a new AI tool coming out. So let's say you invest a whole bunch of time, and I'm actually quite opposed to doing massive AI deployments right now because you might spend a whole bunch of time and money working on deploying something. And then a week later or a month later, there's a new tool that actually would have just simplified all of this and you just pay some small monthly fee for it instead of you doing a whole bunch of custom work.
Yeah.
So usually with AI deployments, I'm more interested in small, easier projects because things will most likely evolve so fast that any big, heavy work that you do right now will become outdated very fast.
Yeah. What are some wins, like you said, easy wins that kind of stack up on each other? What are some easy wins that you can identify that a team who might be in real estate, for instance, might realize if it's even team dependent? What should they look for as far as success is concerned, in
Yeah,
your
I can
opinion?
give you a couple of examples of what we've actually done. There's one business in the commercial real estate space where they were heavily dependent on a small number of leads, or actually really through their own network. So they had the CEO founder had a really nice network, and that's who he would always go to try and get more business. And that worked to some point, but then eventually when we came in, we realized that his network actually wasn't that big. If your network is huge, great. No, you can keep on continuing and working through that network. But if your network is limited, then it's at some point going to be a roadblock for the scaling of your business.
Yeah.
Secondly, we realized that most of his revenue was coming actually from one customer. More than 50% of his revenue was coming from one big customer. And that's always a risk in any business if your customer concentration levels are very high. And in this case, that was the case. And so we immediately started working on creating new sales channels so that this company could now start tapping into people beyond their own personal network. So we actually deployed some really sophisticated lead generation tools that would capture leads that are relevant to what we call our ideal customer profile, or ICP. Then we started outreaching to them using cold email, and we deployed some really sophisticated email tools that were not that complicated, but actually allowed us to go from emailing like a handful of people every week to now emailing 1,000+ people every week in semi-automated ways, and doing it in a way that avoids landing in spam filters. And that actually within 2 months increased his sales pipeline by 25%. And then thereafter, it just continued scaling out from there. So in that case, it was actually, there was a real business problem, and we identified who are the ideal prospects that we want to go after. Where do those people hang out? We realized a lot of their prospects don't hang out on LinkedIn. They don't hang out on a lot of online forums or like some of the modern tools. Many of these ICP were more traditional folks, or maybe people who were more accustomed to email and rather than Slack. So then that presented us this opportunity of, why don't we try reaching out to them using cold email? And that ended up producing good results.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about a typical business and the mistakes that they make with what they want to deploy? Are there some common things that a typical business is doing today that they probably shouldn't be doing off the bat?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Actually, I had a conversation like this yesterday with one of our clients where they thought, okay, I just want to grow to the next level. And so I've got a bunch of money right now. I'm just going to pump it out in all different places and do all kinds of things, get into ads, into newspapers, and put out billboards different places, and then do like flyers in different communities and do all this kind of stuff. And this person was telling me, I have money, so I might as well just spend it. Why don't we just go all out in the next 3 months and spend that money? What people don't understand is it's not just money, but it takes time and effort and energy and mental space. Everything that you do takes time, money, and not just money, but it takes time, mental space, and effort. And so if you try and do everything, hoping that one dart lands in the right spot, then it's usually not the best way of proceeding. It's usually better to think, strategize first. Okay, I have money. That's great. But now what's the best use of everybody's time on the team to take that money and deploy it in a place that actually makes sense? So usually I like to think of, okay, who are the set of people that we want to go after? Where do they hang out, whether online or offline mechanisms? And then now how do I reach them in all these places they hang out? What are the mechanisms that I have to reach them in all the places they hang out? And then I usually like to say, okay, out of all these places they hang out, let's choose 3 or 4 different tests. Like maybe they hang out, let's say in that previous example, on their email. So we'll do one test around cold email for a span of 2 months. And then in parallel, we'll do another test in the second channel, another test in the third channel. Let's say we take 3 channels for a brief period of time, let's say 2 months. We consciously think of how to do relevant tests in each of those 3 areas. And then at the end of those 2 months, we'll hopefully have found that one of them is having better success than the other 2. And we'll just drop off the other 2 and then just go all in on that one that is showing scaling possibilities.
Yeah.
So I'd rather be strategic rather than just throw things all over the place.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you're saying we, who is we? Is it the CEO or the people that are running things at this point? Or are you dealing with the team that's put in place to make all these decisions on behalf of their organization, whoever is underneath them?
Okay, so just generally the way that we work at Scale Up Exec, there's a team of COOs in my group, and they get deployed in different engagements. Any fractional COO might be working at 3 companies or 4 companies at a given time. And they're working at an exec level, right? They're a COO, they're working at exec level. And a COO is usually the person who's side by side working with the CEO to make sure that, firstly, the CEO ideally is working on the strategy, the direction they want to take the company. The COO is validating that, is it possible, given my team and given the capacity and capability of the team, that we can actually work towards those goals and realize them? If yes, then now, okay, I'll take that vision and strategy and break it down and then divide it out and put in the right accountability mechanisms and the right metrics and all that stuff and help my team succeed. And so this is the in-house, we embed into in-house teams, just like a regular full-timer COO would, except we just happen to be part-time.
Yeah, that makes sense. What size company would you say that you typically are dealing with? Because I'm trying to rate the scale of what it means to work with your company at this point. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the smallest customers we have about $1 million in revenue a year. Largest have about 50 million in revenue a year. So it's that range. And they're, like I mentioned, across all different types of industries. And the interesting part is my team are really the top tier. These are the few gems of COOs I've come across after having met hundreds of them through the years, interviewed hundreds of them through the years. So these are all the folks that have scaled businesses from 0 to 8, 9 figures, gotten many of them to exits. They've led every department of a business. They're really skilled at what they do. So that means in just a few hours a day, they can bring disproportionate impact to a business versus somebody who's just average skill set working even full time.
Yeah. And your customers, what do they look like? You went through who they are, but what types of problems would you say that they're suffering from?
Yeah. One of the few areas that we often help with, one is a CEO is way too involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. Ideally, a CEO should be working on vision and strategy, and they have somebody they can trust who's a great manager and leader that comes in and takes that vision strategy and implements it and gets it done. And that's what the COO is. And so that's one type of issue, is we extract CEOs from day-to-day operation so that they can focus more on vision strategy and maybe business development. The second is we've had many engagements where businesses are in a turnaround situation. They're in the bottom. They're really having a tough time, whether it's because market conditions or otherwise. And they often bring in folks like us at that time to help them get back on track. And we've had actually shocking success in turning around all kinds of the most challenging situations and getting companies into profitability very fast. And actually one of our engagements right now, they were in the construction space. They were losing $350K a month for the prior 18 months before we joined them. They were on the verge of having to consider bankruptcy route. Within 3 months of us joining, we got them to net zero, month 4 profitability, and then month 16, we got them to a successful exit. So that's many of the situations we get involved in. And then the third situation is where a business has plateaued. So their revenues are flat. The CEO, founders are stuck. They're not sure what to do next. So we help uncover their growth. And I guess the fourth situation is companies that are already scaling and now they're starting to see the cracks in their team or their culture or their operations. And they need some expert help to get somebody to get their company back on track and be ready for the next phase of growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned scaling quite a few times throughout the people you normally help. Can you talk a little bit about ways that you found to scale a company? So CEO of a company has reached its plateau and reached the hierarchy of what they think is possible. Talk a little bit about what you guys do to scale that company even more than the founders think is possible.
Yep. Firstly, it's actually very important to understand, does the CEO or founder really want to scale to the next level? Everybody often thinks as a business owner that, "Oh, I have to grow my business." But actually, a lot of times when you start diving deeper into what a CEO or founder really wants, it may not actually be scaling. Maybe they want to get out of the day-to-day ops because they're way too involved in it. Maybe they want to get into an advisory role. Right now, they're a CEO role and maybe they're just burnt out. Maybe they want to ensure there's a good leadership team in place that can execute on the business without them having to handle it. Or maybe they just want a steady income to come in so they can support their lifestyle. It's not always necessary that a business has to scale. So I think that's one of the most important things to first uncover in a lot of detail. That is it really what that CEO or founder wants? Because for growth and scaling, it requires a whole different level of financial investment, mental capacity investment, emotional investment, versus staying flat or getting out of the day to day. So it's important to understand personally, what are the goals and why they want to get there. So now let's say a business owner really wants to scale. Now we usually like to do an audit. What are the things that are preventing this business from scaling? And that audit will firstly be on the revenue side. So what are their sales channels right now? How's the market viewing them? What does a competitive landscape look like? So we look at all the different pieces that impact revenue. Secondly, we look at all the margins. So look at all the expenses in the business and where is money going? As the business in the past grew, did the profits also grow? Or were there some things that were blocking growth in margins? And then the third thing we look at, which oftentimes is one of the most important, is the team. And then along with that is the systems and processes that exist for the team. So what are the capacities of the team, the capabilities of the team, and as well as the leadership team members? What are their capabilities, capacities? What are their limitations? What are the gaps? So we'll look at across this revenue, expenses, and team systems processes. We'll look at, based on where we want to get to in the future, here's where we are right now. And then here's all the gaps that exist that are at the moment preventing us from going from today to where we want to get to in the future.
Yeah.
And then we start diving deep into each of those and solving them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you create this list of what's wrong with the business per se, and then go through that list of what's wrong and try to tackle them one at a time. Is there a hierarchy to this list that you typically put together? So meaning the CEO of a company can say, oh, this is working fine, and you guys can sign off on that working fine. Is there anything that a CEO needs to do before he contacts you guys, or what does that look like?
So before contacting us, it's important for them to know that what are their goals, and do they already have a clear path to get to those goals, and they have the team capacity, capabilities to get to that goal or not. If they already have everything in place to get to their goals, you don't need somebody like us to come in. If you don't have a clear path, or the capabilities or capacity in your team or systems or whatever else are not quite there, then it can be relevant to get some outside expertise to come in and help you. And yeah, in terms of your previous question, hierarchy, absolutely. So we might come up with a list of 20 gaps, but we'll try and identify which of those one or two or three, if we were to execute now, would move the needle the most for the business. And some of them might also be, what are the quick wins that we can start getting that are very easy to do and will make a difference? For example, in that commercial real estate business I just mentioned, where we worked on cold email strategies and diversifying their customer base. That was one of the first things that we identified, is that their revenue paths were very limited because of that limited network that the CEO or founder had. And that's what everything was relying on. The whole business was relying on that. And so very quickly we started putting together strategies and then executing to try and diversify that customer base. And it ended up being very beneficial. Actually, that I mentioned in that case, there was one customer contributing more than 50% of the revenue. Sure enough, a year into our engagement, that customer had something that came up and their business went to zero. And luckily, we had already done that work to try and rebuild the whole pipeline with new set of customers. So when that happened, it wasn't a end of the business scenario.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you mentioned this. I'm curious. We have a lot of real estate investors that listen to the show. Do you typically deal with real estate investors? Is that one of the verticals that you typically deal with, would you say?
We have worked with many GPs. We've worked with private equity firms that are raising capital from LPs. We're working with investors if they have a business and they're directly looking to scale out, buying more properties or improving their teams or systems for their teams or their processes, then yes, we have many engagements like that.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the real estate market from the perspective of let's say the GPs slash people that are putting together these programs. We're in a time right now that I think is unprecedented when interest rates are pretty high. A lot of deals don't make sense. So talk a little bit about how you go about scaling a real estate company during these times. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, of course, there's so many different niches within real estate. There's hundreds of them. So some of them are, even when interest rates have been high, and even right now they're quite high, they're still having success. And others are having very difficult time. And even on the residential side, certain niches are doing really well, certain niches are doing really poorly. So that's generally in every industry. There's always going to be winners and losers. And it's important to try and figure out, wish you understand the market really well, to try and figure out what are the niches that seem to be having traction right now, don't have crazy amount of competitive pressure, and I can actually make them headway in. Like I know you've done many podcasts around retail locations, triple N. You've done all kinds of different facets around commercial real estate. So it's actually important right now to understand what is the direction that interest rates are going, which is very clear that it's actually going to become more and more favorable as time goes on. Are there things that I can do to get ahead of that curve so I can actually be ready when money starts flowing in larger volumes? Or right now, are there niches that I don't even have to wait for interest rates to change, that I can actually start getting involved in and start seeing impact? Like, for example, many folks in the hotel space are still doing reasonably well, and they're able to make even numbers work right now. If they're able to find really good locations, they're able to find areas where the population is growing, where there's interesting things happening in the relevant geography. So there's always niches that are working well. And so it's good to now just look broad and deep and see what are those niches that you have expertise in that you can actually contribute to.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you say, should a CEO of a company, what do you think that they should be doing right now that they aren't doing currently? Is there anything that stands out to you as a consultant to these types of companies?
There's always one general thing that I don't see enough entrepreneurs or CEOs doing, which is really understanding themselves. Most times CEOs are running and they rarely have a time to just step back and pause and think, okay, where are we going? Where am I going? How am I feeling about it? And then even diving deep into, okay, what are my skill sets? What are the things I'm doing that are motivational for me or demotivational for me? What are the things that I'm working on that are actually moving the needle for the business versus not moving the needle for the business? What are my personal ambitions? How does business intersect with my personal life? And so, like, many of these questions, to just understand yourself, understand where you're going, and are you actually flowing in a direction that makes sense for you personally? Eventually, at the end of the day, the dollar number that you make is only one piece of your life journey. There is actually a lot more to your life journey, which might be the situation you're in or how your business life intersects with your personal life. And even for you, I'm sure you've been thinking about a lot of this in the recent months.
Yeah.
But many entrepreneurs, they just race because that's what they feel they have to do as an entrepreneur, versus like just taking a step back and seeing, where am I going? And is this what I really want for my life? And am I satisfied and content? If I have a high level of contentment, that's probably good. If I have a low level of contentment in the direction of my life right now, then I probably should pause and reassess and reevaluate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to when something like a stroke happens to you, how you start thinking about all of these things and what's important to your life and what makes you happy and all of that. I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, or provide any kind of perspective, but take an entrepreneur who realizes that they're not happy. What can make them happy in their current business, or what do you recommend as a way to get out of your current situation and get into something that does make you happy? Is there anything that comes to mind, would you say?
Yeah. I think one of the first things I've at least learned in my own life is that we often pitch our happiness on external factors. And let's say my spouse and I are having a good relationship right now. I'm happy. Let's say my spouse and I are having a difficult time. I'm not happy. Let's say I have some health issues. I'm not happy. If my health is good, I'm happy. Let's say something's happening in the political scene that's positive for me. I'm happy. Otherwise, I'm unhappy. Like that'll keep our happiness levels. If we're staking on or pitching our tent on something external, it's always going to go up and down. And even if for momentarily we're happy, soon afterwards we'll be unhappy because something else changed in the external environment. So I'm actually more of a fan of first seeing if we can pitch our happiness to our internal space rather than our external space. Our internal space is really the one thing that we have control over. How we react to things is under our control. How much time we spend on introspection is in our control versus focused on external things. So I think it's actually more important to see, how much of my time am I spending with myself? People ask me, oh, what book do you really like to read, or would you recommend to other people? And nowadays, I think it's actually more relevant to read the book of yourself, read yourself, understand yourself, all your good, bad, and ugly aspects of me. Understand how I'm feeling right now. Understand what is it that I want in my life. What are the things so just like diving deep and contemplating on yourself and understanding yourself. And then eventually finding a stable point inside of that you can pitch yourself to. So that it doesn't matter what happens outside, and I don't react. I don't get emotionally caught into things. Instead, I project from a space of inner stability.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially just going through a life-threatening situation like what I just went through. All of these things, all of these emotions come to the forefront, and am I living my life to the fullest, and what am I doing wrong, and all of that. All of those emotions come flooding past you and make you realize what's important and what's not important. If people want to learn more about you or your products, your services, what would be the best way to get in touch, would you say?
Yeah, best way to get in touch is our website, scaleupexec.com. Actually, on there, you can book time directly with me, and I'm always happy to be a sounding board for folks as they're working through the business. And I often feel like if you've learned a few things in life, it's valuable to share that and to help others in their journey. So I'm always available for being a sounding board for anybody. So
Yeah.
you can reach me through scaleupexec.com.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And Ashish, I certainly thank you for the time here today. And I think that you've gone through a lot of different types of companies and businesses and participated in a lot of these types of businesses, seen the scaling, and you've seen the negative side of that as well. I think that your input to all of these things is incredibly valuable at this point. Yeah. Anyone who reaches out to you, whether that be to hire your company or to get advice from you, I think they should do it. Yeah, that it's great advice.
Well, thanks for the conversation today. Nice questions.
No problem.